Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life,
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. Trends, politics, business, you name it, we cover it. And this episode, of course, is going to be about the election. We have started early voting, which will be April 24th, because voting is going to be important this year because we expect low voter turnout. So in this kind of election, your vote matters. And as Jimmy is still with us at this lovely city of Fort Worth, it will be his last election. Or will you stay Fort Worth home? How's this work?
Yeah, we have to figure out
Residency at Disneyland looks like.
Well, we have to figure out if we want to make my in-laws our permanent address, or if we want to make my parents our permanent address. And I mean, choosing between Texas and Florida is like choosing between two types of turds. So,
and you have to, staying in Fort Worth, it actually might matter because what is that, Collin County in Florida?
Yeah,
so it's even worse.
Yeah,
I don't know how progressive your parents' area in Florida is, but it seems like having a little PO box in Fort Worth District 9 or 11, could help you out.
Yeah, which I don't actually know if you can PO box for voter registration.
Probably
I
not.
don't think
Probably
you can.
not.
Yeah.
We're over here doing conspiracies right here on the show that we're not allowed to be doing.
It was a big weekend in the fort, though.
Yeah, it was. Big weekend. Big weekend. I had a blast this weekend. I had one of my best friends from Vegas in town. I also had family in town. We went to the LBW festival. That was wicked. There was Raul Alejandro, which I didn't go to, but that's a big reggaeton artist. And then you had the arts festival. Yeah,
arts festivals.
Remember,
we're still beefing between Sasha and Main Street. So it's there's the Main Street Arts Festival, but then in Sundance Square there's the Fort Worth Arts Fest, and that's where they had the music. I think Lou. No, yeah, somebody played. Yeah, very specifically, not thanks to the Main Street Arts Festival, thanks to Fort Worth Arts Fair, because they, aren't jiving right now still.
So that little museum tent part was a separate part of everything else.
Yeah.
That's so confusing.
That's the Fort Worth Arts Fair, where that big bar. Yeah.
Yeah, and then between that is just so Fort Worth right there. It's hey, let's not duke it out and just let's just play nice.
Yeah, we're.
But I'm glad they're together because I don't know if they would be appeasing separately.
Yeah, I mean, my thing with the Main Street Arts Fest is I don't know. It's a little stale.
Yeah,
but I think you really realize how much Fort Worth suffers from not having space in downtown to just hang out. There's nothing to do other than walk through the tents. So everybody is walking through the tents instead of, and then you've got 100 chairs in Sundance Square where there's loud music going on. So if they rolled out some AstroTurf and just had a couple areas where people could just hang out, chill, make a day of it,
have a little picnic.
Yeah, it'd be a great time.
Yeah.
Now it's just kind of try and look at art because you can't actually get into the tents because there's too many people walking in between.
Yeah, they keep that nice and skinny.
Yeah. Can't infringe on Sundance Square property though because they got their own thing going on.
Wow. Yeah. Good analysis, I guess, on that. But yeah, we had a lot of fun, but I know we got to do some stories here. So if you're here with us, welcome. This is the 817 podcast. We do 3 short stories, 1 big story, our wins and losses for the city. We do that every week, and that's kind of our constant. Last week, we had Pamela Young from United Fort Worth. That was one of my favorite shows. I thought she was excellent and provided a lot of depth of why it's important to vote while also keep your city council accountable while they're voting on things throughout their term.
Yeah, so first short story for today is just going to be an update on something we talked about last week. So last week we talked about how there was funding for municipal flood mitigation projects that was going to be moved to Panther Island so that the ball could keep rolling there. Then at the city council meeting on Tuesday, it came up that like that's not exactly what was going on. Like that is what's going on, but it's not going to actually delay the projects that funding was being taken from. So Assistant City Manager Dana Bergdorf said we can't afford to delay them. You know, they're life safety projects. We need to complete them. We are going into cost overruns, so this is just like cash flow management. So the week before, Assistant Stormwater Management Director Jennifer Dyke told the Fort Worth Report that some of the city's 11 affected projects that were having funding moved may be delayed. Then on Tuesday, we're saying, no, that's not true. It's just funding moving around. A chart provided by the city shows that all of the selected projects will see no impact to construction schedule. However, there's a few projects that could be impacted if short-term funding is not available. So really just seems like poor communication across the board here, poor way that information was presented, but different from how things were perceived last week. Theoretically, these projects should not be delayed.
Yeah. And I'm looking at what Elizabeth Beck said here. She said the issue should not be solely attributed to rising inflation. Beck showed expressed concern that the city is consistently underbidding for large infrastructure projects. Quote, we're lowballing what we're telling our residents, Beck said. Quote, that's not good for y'all. It's not good for the city.
And it makes me question, like, who is it that's bidding these projects? Because if it is somebody who, you know, has a lot of experience working with the city, then they might know that, like, hey, I can underbid these projects to try and get the contract, and then, you know, I can follow up with all these whatever reasons of why there's cost overruns, they're still going to pay it, yada, yada, yada. Versus, you know, when we had Dante on, I don't know, has it been a year ago? Yeah. And he was talking about getting development projects with the city, especially for minority-owned companies, how it can be tough to, like, break that initial barrier. So do you have these people with experience kind of underbidding things, knowing that they'll be able to add on cost overruns later, versus people trying to give an honest estimate? I don't. It definitely begs the question of maybe more transparency in how we're coming up with these numbers.
Yeah, no, even Mayor Parker said, I think maybe it's our greatest mistake here is not actually the information within it, it's how we present it. And it's just interesting how some topics get a conversation or like create a lot of insight. So if we talk about police oversight, it seems like we should be having a development oversight board of some type, or people who are responsible outside of the city to communicate, I don't know, these kind of incidents. Like, you know, if we often give the economic development people a hard time for like how they recruit, support businesses, it seems like this process of bidding needs to be more also set at a high expectation, and nothing that we all just figure out at the end of the situation where it's too late for us to know. This should be easier to document along the way. You know, I think how the police oversight board or how we talk about economic development, this needs to have more community support on wanting to be interested in how does this work, because it's buildings in our or projects in our area. And if people like Beck are saying that we can't just keep saying, oh, inflation is the reason why, oh, costs went up, so we need it. And I understand if you now need it today, so you're moving a bunch of money, but it just still needs to be communicated more clearly, even possibly before you do it.
Yeah.
And that's probably the even scarier part. It's you don't have the freak out if it's people finding out later because you didn't make a clear campaign or announcement about projects going on that you're taking money from now, but you're saying the money's going to be back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those things where symptoms of larger issues come out in random ways. And
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
This is the same with like the trash pickup contract that they like re-upped last year, where all of a sudden last minute, like someone's up at city council meeting saying, hey, like you didn't give anybody else a fair chance to bid this. And at this point, like it's a little bit too late to do
100%.
anything. So how do we get ahead of that? And it's kind of this cycle of like, we're going to talk about voter turnout today, and I'm sure we'll talk about voter turnout plenty through the election because people aren't going to show up because they don't think that their government works for them, and so they are apathetic towards like the things going on, like my voice doesn't matter, and this is just kind of like another symptom of that we have to try and open up to make accessible to people.
Yeah.
Well, talking about something that Fort Worth did have a say on about 12 years ago. Well, I don't know. No, I will say that this
By
is...
the way, people have been saying, man, ever since we found out Jimmy was leaving, he's been angry or more upset at everything. But I love it. Bring no F's Jimmy to the pod.
Yeah, this is something I'm legitimately upset doesn't exist in Fort Worth. Fort Worth Report published an article this week. Will streetcars return to Fort Worth? With growth comes a renewed interest in this project. This was absolutely like a room where it happened sort of thing in 2010 where Fort Worth was going to be given funding to build a streetcar in downtown, and all of a sudden, Jungus Jordan and people in that vein on city council killed the project. But the potential idea for it is back, and this is something we've talked about a lot recently, was that Fort Worth is not connected. Fort Worth's cultural centers are not connected at all. But downtown Fort Worth has committed $10,000 to study the possibility of a streetcar line in the downtown area that would theoretically connect Stockyards, Panther Island development, TCU Medical School, Texas A&M Convention Center expansion, everything that's happening in Fort Worth that we need to talk about. How are we going to move people around here? I was excited to see this potentially come up. What do you think?
No, I was actually in San Diego for work this last week, and they have like a trolley kind of car system, and I stayed at another hotel from where the conference was, so they have that accessibility, and then there was also a busing route that was very to the airport, things that we definitely don't have in our downtown, but I could see the benefit of this. And I think the approach of this like style of transportation could be a good toe in the water step for people who maybe see today's bus system in Fort Worth or as not rideable because of the branding busing has in Texas or in the city of Fort Worth.
Yeah,
this could be like it gives you like more of a playful, curious discovery vibe of, if I'm going to do it, this seems cool, like a streetcar. So yeah,
and this is going to go along with the next story we'll talk about, but it just tells me that we're thinking about development in the downtown area in a different way than we have in the past, where we've got Deco 969. Like, we're going to have people living in downtown, like actually living in downtown. And then Carlos Flores is like, all this development is happening, like, we need to connect the island to downtown, to the Stockyards, to the near north side. Who knows, all the way to the airport. Who knows, all the way to South Main. Like, it kind of brings to light this idea that we are finally potentially looking at growth development in a way that is actually going to lead to some really positive growth for the downtown area, and like make downtown a livable place for people and a place that locals want to go and hang out. It really could be game changing.
No, yeah, 100% with I even just think about how cool of this weekend was in Fort Worth, and this was going to be my win for Fort Worth, but we had a weekend where we had the third largest art festival in the country with the UBW Festival, which was like an EDM festival. There was like 5,000 people there because I attended, and then you also had the Raul Alejandro, which is a top 5 reggaeton artist, selling out the Dickies Arena.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the proximity of Panther Pavilion to Dickies Arena to downtown, I did all of those but the Dickies Arena part, but I drove by it, but I had to be in my car. I had to communicate with my wife and other people who weren't driving or weren't going, hey, can you pick us up? So I just think about how close it could have been to, let's say people out of town was going to go to this EDM festival or to the Raul Alejandro concert, and they were downtown at the music festival. Like, if they could have just parked once and figured out how to get to their next spot, stuff like that. That if we're and shout out to probably I would say Visit Fort Worth for all this organization and setting these kind of things up. But if we're going to do this more, where it's interactive tourism, where the tourists are with the locals and we're both enjoying something, unlike the stockyards where it's like all tourists and we don't really visit it. This is a different style of interactions, and so like, how do we integrate feasible and concise transportation that allows us? I mean, because we were walking from Panther Pavilion to the Firestone Apartments to our car, and that bridge, those roads. Mm-hmm. You're crossing 7th. You got 1,000 people walking across the bridge from Panther Island, parking all the way in the apartments. It's like, it was kind of a mess, but
yeah. Guess how far I walked on Friday.
Well, you also are a natural walker, but you walked 2.5 miles.
12. So, we've only had one car since like 2018. And so on Friday, my wife took our kid to her parents' house in Allen. And so like she worked remotely from there. So they dropped me at Cherry in the morning. So I'm hanging on South Main, and I wanted to go see a movie, and the Clear Fork.
What did you watch?
John Wick 4.
How was it?
Amazing. 3 hours of completely unnecessary fun. Movie could have been 30 minutes long, but it being 3 hours was amazing. But the only theater that had morning show times was in Clear Fork, and I was like, my plan the night before, I was like, maybe I'll like try and figure out the bus system. To use the buses to get from Cherry to Clear Fork would have taken longer than me just walking. So I was like, you know what? Like, it's a beautiful day. It's like 70 degrees.
It was beautiful.
I'm just going to walk. So, I go up 8th a little bit to the street that like the zoo runs down, and then connect to the Trinity Trail from there. And, great little walk, like 5.5 miles. Like, didn't really even notice it. Like, you're walking down the river, just enjoying.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Though, no bathrooms along the way, obviously, because we can't provide facilities to people.
Yep.
So, 5.5 miles there. I watched the movie. I was going to doubleheader it with something else, but then just because of how long it was, I didn't get out in time. So then it's like 2:30. I'm like, what do I want to do? I was like, I'm going to go hang out over on South Main. And again, it was like I could grab a ride, or it's still 70 degrees out. It's perfect. So, 6.5 miles back. It took about 2 hours, but it's just so indirect. Like, we just don't have. I'm walking right alongside a railroad the whole time. Like, wow, there could be a train here. Who would have thought about that?
Yeah.
But it's just so indirect that you turn like a 3.5, 4 mile walk into 7 miles because we just don't have a way to connect people. Long-winded story to also say that, we're already extending light rail to the hospital district. Like, next stop, let's take it to Clear Fork. Like, let's continue this connectivity, make this an accessible city, make our actually like bring our assets together so that they can feed off of one another.
Yeah, that is a wicked walk. Actually, so much that I'm interested in doing it. That sounded like a good walk.
I will say the walk from like Clear Fork to like University, where you cross over the Trinity, like feels really easy. But that walk from Rosedale to South Main, like it's long. You just don't, you think like, oh, I'm in the near south side, like I'm on Rosedale. It's like, no, like that's more than half of the distance that I walked. And, it's not the most scenic thing along there.
Yeah. Well, we're going to also we talked about the streetcars. We also have updates that Southern Land Company will seek land for another luxury tower in Fort Worth. Deco 969 remains under construction. But however, we have to note that this was the first residential tower in downtown Fort Worth in about 30 years. Fort Worth hasn't seen as much high-rise residential development as other cities of similar size. But the people who run Deco 969 plans to find more land to build another tower.
Yeah, I mean, we've been anti-high-rise, anti-residential downtown for 30 years. It's really cool that, it took them 12 years to secure the land that would become Deco 969, but now we're already talking about doing it again. I think this is an exciting development for everything that downtown can be.
Yeah, and Southern Land Company targeted the Central Library building for a potential development, but Dart Interest secured the site. Dart Interest intended to construct a high-rise development potentially featuring 2 towers, but the company remains early in the planning process and specifics remain fluid. Planning is far from concrete, but the property's location lends itself to be a combination of office and multifamily development. The existing zoning allows for both types of development. Deco 969 will fully deliver around this time next year, and consumer demand has outpaced Southern Land Company's predictions.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. If we're talking within like maybe a 5-year period, we're going Deco 969, whatever develops on top of the Central Library, more residential, another tower downtown, plus Texas A&M. Like, downtown's going to look radically different by 2025, 2028, definitely 2030, to where it won't even be recognizable to what it is right now.
Yeah, and this person here, I think could be someone Downey, who is a leader at the company. He says in Nashville, I bet there's at least 30 luxury high-rise apartment buildings. Like what we're doing in Fort Worth, it's the same population and generally the same income and number of jobs. I think we're seeing is people in Fort Worth want something luxurious too. So I think that's an interesting, like, comparing that Nashville growth of high-rise apartments to Fort Worth. And
yeah, which luxury is a misnomer, right? Like,
yeah.
Every apartment complex is quote-unquote luxury because it, I don't know, has a dishwasher that was made in the 2010s. Like,
yeah.
So I don't think we're talking about things that are like the Montgomery Plaza lofts that are like crazy expensive. Like,
Yep.
I think we're just talking normal apartment complexes that, they're brand new, so they're going to be nice. But we're not talking about necessarily a higher demographic of people that can only afford them.
No, yeah. And it's going to be cool just to see how, like, I know we have a lot of old office spaces in there, so if we're building new office space more over by Crockett Row and all this new office space, but yet we want these luxury apartments downtown. This also just goes to the importance of the streetcar. If people, it's like this weird. If we're building modern office offices because what we have downtown isn't fresh. But yet we're going to pit fresh luxury apartments. I don't know. I'm looking at long term. What could that look like? Because you look at what happened at Crockett Row, and you look at how that turned into like the college bar area. But they said that was going to be for like young professionals.
Which also shout out that happened this week that like the city is contesting the liquor license for
yes,
yeah, those racists, like get them out of here. I'm all about that.
Tell the full story of what happened here and what's yeah, that was a story as well. I think that could have been a short story.
Yeah, so Fort Worth has filed a protest to block Varsity Tavern from getting a new liquor license and reopening. They closed at the beginning of the year and have plans to reopen as country-themed Tequila Ranch. The city says the bar created crime, noise, and traffic. Elizabeth Beck says it drains an enormous amount of our police department resources that could be and should be used in our neighborhoods to keep our residents safe. What became abundantly clear was that it was going to be Varsity Tavern in cowboy boots, this new reopened place. The TABC bar had 6 violations in the last 2 years, and the city's protest lists traffic, crime, and the roughly 30 bars in the neighborhood as reasons to block it. When you have that many inebriated people in such a small area, it attracts a certain level of chaos. Bar, has also faced complaints that its dress code was discriminatory. Honestly, like, Varsity had been there a long time. Like, Varsity was maybe the first of that genre of bar that existed downtown. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that they are responsible in a large way for creating and continuing a culture and cultivating a certain environment in that area that has made it unappealing to the majority of Fort Worth residents to go visit and kind of like stunted the growth of a cultural center. So I saw that and I laughed and I was like, man, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so that was an example of how something turned into more of a college turn-up place, and even like Bar Louie didn't, left. Like a classic family place that people like eating across the country. Could hang with the crazy beast of Varsity Tavern.
Yeah, I mean Fred's, Magnolia Motor Lounge.
Yeah, much more kind of cool, calm, collective, professional settings that would have complement maybe that living area plus the cultural district.
Well, that's way to go, Elizabeth Beck.
Yeah.
And way to go, Fort Worth protesting. So kind of moving on to our big story, we want to talk about the election, maybe not specifically like who's on the ballot, but early voting has started today, and it'll run through Election Day. And there's just a few things that have happened this week and over the last couple of weeks that we want to bring up. First is that the Tarrant County elections chief quit after meeting with the county judge, saying he won't compromise values. So Hyder Garcia has been the elections official, the Tarrant County elections chief for the past 5 years, and is known as one of the best elections officials in the state of Texas, well respected by both Democrats and Republicans. Like, just honestly one of those perfect people to have in this position, super experienced. And, in comes the far right Tim O'Hare, and, we started this elections integrity committee headed up by known man of integrity Bill Wayburn. And it seems clear that the direction that they want to take our elections and our democratic processes does not line up with democracy. And Hyder Garcia, who has taken a lot of heat from these lunatics that are having their voices amplified, has finally said, enough is enough. Like, I can't do this anymore, and I'm not going to compromise my values to fit what you as a far right partisan want these elections to be.
Yeah, we were already one of the 4 counties that participate in the bogus Donald Trump election fraud race that received very few issues in our audit. So he had to deal with all that. You have politicians like Commissioner Brooks saying he's the best or one of the best election officials in the state of Texas. You got Glenn Whitley also talking highly of this person. We also think he is a Republican. We haven't confirmed that, but
Well, Tim O'Hare was part of appointing him to his position in 2018.
So, and this guy gives me a sense of very smart, very honest, and thank God we have people like him in the state of Texas. And now he's at the point where he's like, he can not go any further. And now it seems like O'Hare can put someone in place there that fits his agenda.
Yeah, I think that Garcia's quote that really stuck with me was saying to Tim O'Hare, "I wish you the best. Tarrant County deserves that you find success." And I think success in Garcia's book is probably different than success in Tim O'Hare's book. But this is a big red flag for Tarrant County elections. He's going to stay on through this coming election and potential runoffs in June. But after that, like, I think we have to be on alert for shenanigans happening here.
Yeah, and Jim Riddlesberger, a classic political science professor at TCU who constantly does quotes for the Star-Telegram, said, quote, "A chilling effect. We have to understand that we live in a country now where there's a disagreement between Democrats and Republicans about accepting election results. To the degree that we're raising that conflict, it's going to make it, I think, even more difficult moving forward. It can make it more difficult moving forward to kind of have consensus about who wins an election." He ends on saying, "The question of how that's going to play out moving forward is something that I think it's both interesting to potentially devastating, because if we can't even agree that elections are fair, then obviously it's really difficult to govern." So I don't know. I just wonder, like, I look at the courage that happened in Georgia and how the people of Georgia, or like the political officials, fought against find me more votes. Like, I wonder, did we need Garcia to, like, stand up against, the Trump is Tim O'Hare in this situation. Mm-hmm. But I guess Tim O'Hare is directly your boss, where Trump was a federal guy showing up to your state and your county being like, go find me more votes. I don't know. Because if Garcia's not there, then we're, it had to be pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a... this obviously plays on more of a local level where, like, people might be, like, mad that I say this, but Texas isn't turning blue anytime soon.
Yeah.
Like, Texas isn't Georgia in how close it was to being a swing state. And I think the implication here for Tarrant County is in partisan positions, like on the commissioner's court. If there's a close election, what's going to happen the next time a Democrat wins a seat? Is that all of a sudden going to be a bogus election?
And it's going to be close if that happens.
Yeah, and then if we're talking city council, like, are they going to meddle in city council elections even though they're not partisan? I don't know. That, like, feels like maybe another extra leap because they are technically nonpartisan, even though, we all kind of know who stands where. So I think even looking more, like, comparing to Georgia, I think on the local level, on the commissioner's level, on the county judge level, we do need somebody to be able to stand up and say, like, no, I can't go find you more fake votes, or I can't make votes disappear. But one piece too, so, like, this transition from, local reporting to the New York Times picked this up, and the New York Times, there were a couple of details that got like a little bit clouded, which happens often when local news stories kind of transition to national to somebody who's not used to covering the area. But one thing they said was that they described Tarrant as deep red, and then the clap back on Twitter was people saying like Biden won this county and Beto won this county and whatever, and that was my initial response to and then the more I thought about it, I was like, no, like we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to have an accurate viewpoint of where we are at. And that is a massive county with an incredibly conservative lead official in Tim O'Hare, an incredibly conservative commissioner's court, incredibly conservative leaning judgeships, a city council that is majority Republican. And although we don't have any like zealots on either side on city council, which I think we can be thankful for, like it's after this coming election, it's going to lean even more conservative numbers wise than it is now. So like maybe because Biden won by 200 votes, you say like we're not deep red, but when you look at the underbelly of who we are, like we are a deep red city and a deep red county that's kind of got on a mask to try and seem like it's otherwise.
And that is actually something we're going to hit too. Is we're expected low voter turnout this go around, and so when you don't have someone exciting or a president on the ballot, our normal elections are extremely deep red. Like we are a deep red state when you take out the exciting ones, and then in the exciting ones we come out ahead, but very little. It's just what's scary about this is how far up you can argue at the state level and at the county level in Texas. Everyone has groupthink, and if everyone believes doing something wrong is okay for the greater good of Texas, this is why it's scary that if you go with who's the most powerful politicians in Texas, how many people start before you say the first Democratic name? Mm. And it's probably somewhere between 10 to 25 people. And then if those people, like you said, become more right, it's not that far-fetched where now look what's happening in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. It's not far away for Texas.
No, definitely
that is not far away for us.
And I think, so like one thing I think Fort Worth Report does a great job of educating voters on who it is that's running. I think, Star Telegram does it somewhat, not to the same extent, but I think that the fact that we have to rely on the funding of candidates instead of the like push of local media to try and get people out to vote is a major flaw for the area, because like what would it look like for media outlets like Star Telegram, like Fort Worth Weekly, like Fort Worth Report to be advertising that the election is coming, or for the city to actually put like spending dollars not towards a candidate but towards like this election is coming, because if you don't go to fortworthreport.com, like you're not going to know anything about the upcoming election. If you don't subscribe to the Star Telegram, especially via print, like you're probably not going to know that there's an election coming. And so, especially in an election like this one, where we've got 10 city council seats plus the mayor, and maybe like 2 or 3 of them are competitive. So like there's not money being spent in these races to reach people. So who's going to know that an election is coming? Like, I think we as a city have to actually take seriously the idea of trying to get people out to vote and putting money towards that instead of just, throwing up our hands and reporting on, voter turnout's going to be low. Like, we've always sucked at it, but this time we're especially going to.
And that's the conservative strategy.
Right.
Is to keep it low, right? We saw on April 17th in a gathering, Tim O'Hare told people that he's never seen a quieter election and urged a group to take advantage to remove 2 unnamed members of Fort Worth City Council. Quote, one of them believe men can have periods, O'Hare said. Need I say anything else? ? O'Hare declined to say anything else when asked who he was talking about. But like they're in meetings saying, jackpot, we have going to be the lowest turnout and they're just going to get more ahead. And like, look at this. We're talking, right, in 2016, less than 16,000 Fort Worth people voted for the new seats, the 2 new seats we have.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at the opinion article that they wrote, there's really nothing about like, why is this important? How does this impact the entire city? That was under 4% of Fort Worth registered voters. When you look at 2021, more than 87,000 people voted during the Deborah Peoples and Maddie Parker stuff. But still, that was less than 20% of a 500,000 plus registered voters.
Yeah.
And so that's our most exciting local event. But right, Maddie Parker's not running against anyone exciting this time. It's like, oh, yeah. And then, you know what else is a big voting block? Michael Crane's district. Don't got to go out to vote if Maddie's there and Crane's there. The 2 people you're probably fans of in that district, you're like, oh, they're there. I don't need to vote. That actually might go well for progressives potentially, but there's no one really at the city level we're voting for together.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like, man, you're looking at large blocks that usually vote that really don't have to get excited to vote this go around.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be, so to kind of say to everyone here, it's like, you got to go vote. If you want to, if you want to exercise your influence as a citizen, it doesn't get more vital than this because how small the pool is going to be. People are going to win by the tens.
Yeah, like, let's just math it out. We've got 10 city council seats that are each going to have a constituent population between like 85 and 95,000 people. Let's say that's 60,000 registered voters, taking out kids and people that can't vote. If we're looking at 5% voter turnout,
which would be good. That's 3,000 people. So when you look at, say, District 7 with 3 people with similar-ish beliefs that are all running against each other with Macy Hill and Beckholm and Jason Ellis, like, you're talking about 3,000 people, 3,000 votes split between 3 people. Like, it's going to come down to the tens, hundreds. Then you take it to District 11 where you've got 5 people who all like span different neighborhoods, different realms of influence. Like 3,000 equally divided by 5, 600. So then you plus or minus a couple hundred here and there, and likely going to a runoff. Like a runoff's going to come down to sub 50 votes, I would guess. And so if you're listening, like we are the grassroots that like have to bring people alongside us to go out and vote. And we don't have a grassroots culture here. Like we talked to United Fort Worth last week. It's like there's capacity. There are only so many people, and it's them and maybe a couple other organizations. So like it really falls on all of us to try and bring along that one person, that 2 people, our neighbors who you don't
think are politically engaged to decide who's representing you.
Yeah, and I said District 7 with Crane. He's District 3. Firestone is 7. But there's another one, by the way, that's not exciting. District 4 is not exciting, right? Carrie Moon's district. Like, you don't have a brand like a Carrie Moon that gets people either roused up to go against him or go for him. So there's so many, like, if you have to go get that person, like, understand, Nettles only won by 119 votes against Kelly Allen Gray. Jared Williams only won by fewer than 273 votes in the runoff. And if you even look at, like, even the, like, larger sections, like Ted Cruz, right? Like, Ted Cruz technically got the whole, he got, during his runoff against Dewhurst, he got 151,600 votes from the state of Texas, which is 1.16% of eligible Texas voters to, like, get his seat. You know, like, that's who all voted for Cruz. 150,000 people voted for Ted Cruz in the state of Texas. Now that's why we have to deal with his ass. It's wild. Like, but that's why we got to go vote. Like, young people, you know, progressive people, people who want to see Texas Fort Worth feel a little bit more like the people looking at it. We can't continue to have that the 64-year-old person voting is the average voter, like it was in 2017. The average Fort Worthian is 34. The average person who vote is 64. So if you're a 64 plus person listening to this election pod, let me give you a thesis that I think you should consider when voting. Like you, sitting, probably listening to this podcast, retired. You were retired because your financial advisor diversified your stocks. If you put all your stocks in one place, that is ultra risky. Diversifying your stocks gives perspective, different perspectives of the market, allowing you to stabilize your own economy in your household so that you could be retired. Well, then why would you vote for the same person who looks like the same person with the same views every single time? Why would you do that to yourself? You're putting the same, you have to diversify your city council. You have to diversify what you do and vote on, because if you continue to vote the same way, it would be like investing in your 401k into the same one right side radical stock. You have to diversify. And to me, that's how I'm voting this election. Who will bring the most different, unique perspective to improve the diversity, reflections, and what we currently don't have in the seat? Because, and I think that is like my call to people who don't get excited to vote, or they just vote the same way because they see other people voting their way. I think you just got to realize, if I imagine this is going to be a 64-year-old age voting election, so I'm giving like that call to like try to at least people to realize how important what you're doing for like decades instead of days approach to why you're, you know, who you're voting for matters. Because again, District 11, it's a different story, but like whoever wins that probably going to be there for a while.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I'm voting for my friend. Let know your friend's going to be there for a while. Like you might want to make sure, like, or you're just going to vote for someone you saw a sign for or whatever. Like, we got to be intentional on who we're voting for. Listen to the different debates on the Fort Worth Report and our debate, and United Fort Worthers had a debate. And think about what do you see that Fort Worth currently don't have in leadership? Because groupthink is how making elections not matter happen. So diversifying our portfolio sounds really important right now in our county, our city, and the state.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. You want to move to wins and losses?
Let's do it.
Okay, my loss, and
is a great example about what we just talked about. Your loss right here.
We're going to the state level, and that's this week. The Texas Senate passed a bill to force every public school classroom in the state to prominently display a copy of the Ten Commandments. They also passed a bill to set prayer and Bible reading times during the school day. Now, this passed the Senate. I don't know if the House has seen it yet. But very legitimately, like, this isn't some sort of like radical look at what they did today, and then you read it and you're like, oh, I don't really see that. Public elementary or secondary school shall display in a conspicuous place in each classroom of the school a durable poster or framed copy of the 10 Commandments. I mean, where are we? Like, y'all are supposed to love the Constitution. Y'all are supposed to love the Bill of Rights. And yet, I think it very clearly says that there is a separation of church and state. And so I don't know where you're going with this. Like, how is this religious freedom? How is this small government? Like, this is just absolutely absurd.
Yeah. I have no comment or, I would imagine, like, especially how diverse public school kids are today in Texas, right? The majority of people are minority, especially 18 or under. You got 60% of your public school in Fort Worth being Latino. This is how you indoctrinate them, keeping them consistent with what you're afraid America is losing. That's kind of the conservative party. And that's a shame. And I just, that's a big loss. Another thing I want to recognize for a loss is Brandon Zapata, 20-year-old, who got in a confrontation, I guess, got into it with some police or a police that wasn't even, like, he was off duty at La Gran Plaza. He passed away. And there was justice for Brandon. There was a vigil, and it was held outside of South Fort Worth Party Hall. It was organized by Tara Maldonado Wilson, a community activist and also running for District 11. Zapata was restrained and handcuffed by a security guard, including an off-duty Fort Worth police officer. April 11th, he was, quote, acting erratically. Which the parents and people believe that there's need to be more to the story. Supposedly, he was dealing with he has asthma, was dealing with lack of an inhaler or needing to breathe. So the erratic behavior was because he was needing help, and that's why he went there. A lot of information to be discussed, but I just think it just feels like we continue to have stories like either this Brandon Zapata's family and him no longer being here. Plus now you have something like as that, and then you have all the way another loss from people are not even able to do the autopsy for the man who died in jail. You got our guy leaving the election results. It's like it's such an important time for our state and our city and our county. And it's just a loss because it's these little things that people don't see impact because we're not voting and providing an environment that allows us to take out the systemic oppression or racism or whatever the issue that allows young black and brown people to continue to somehow be more likely to die in a confrontation with a police officer. And that comes to systemic consciousness of how we vote and who we vote on gets our results. And so that's my loss.
Yeah, really sad. Was really there's like some security video out there you can watch, and it's hard to tell what they call acting erratic because you can't really see it in the video. Just really sad that so often interactions between minorities and police have to turn to this and not to actually offering help. My win is that Forest Park Pool's $11 million makeover is starting in May. This was a big deal, like right when Elizabeth Beck got into office, talking about, are we going to close the Forest Park Pool? And then, people coming out in droves to say, like, no, like, we need to invest in this. And so it should take the pool will be closed for about a year as they redo it. It'll include a new lap pool with 8 50-meter lanes, a separate leisure pool, and a large slide. So by next summer, it seems like this will be ready to go. So that's a exciting win for that neighborhood, and to see a project followed through on from a bond because people made their voices heard.
Yeah. My win, I'll keep it simple. Like I said, we had a busy weekend in Fort Worth. Kudos to Visit Fort Worth. Kudos to anyone who's curating all of these awesome events that are more than the typical rodeo cowboy culture stuff. I was really proud. I had family and friends in town, and Fort Worth just felt like a city. So kudos to everyone who organized anything from parking spaces to licenses to whatever it needed to make all this stuff happen with the festival to the concerts. It has to be a lot of work, has to be a lot of logistics. So kudos to anyone who ran Fort Worth to be successful this weekend.
Yeah, a couple other cool things that happened. Panther City Lacrosse qualified for the playoffs for the first time.
I wore my Panther City Lacrosse jersey to the festival.
Nice.
Yep.
And so the Texas Rangers got their City Connect jerseys this week. So every MLB team over a span of like 5 or 6 years is having an alternative jersey released that is inspired by the community in which they're in. And so Arlington's pulled from both Dallas and Fort Worth, and they pulled from the Fort Worth Cats and from Panther City and created this logo that's like a panther with wings, like combined with, I think it's the Eagles that were in Dallas a long time ago. And so they wore those jerseys for the first time on Friday night, I think, but they look awesome.
If you haven't, need to buy one of these.
Yeah, if you haven't seen them yet, they're super cool. But I was like, that's really cool to see Panther City get a look on the national stage.
Heck yeah, that looks dope. I'll be all in for that. Well, beautiful people, we have got to the end of the 817 podcast. Please go out and vote. April 24th to May 2nd is early voting. Then May 6th, we looked at the election locations. All of them look like they're the same one. So go out there, take someone, make sure you vote. And for all of you who think we're here to make, have an agenda or we're trying to make Fort Worth more progressive, my answer to all of you is just, we are trying to make Fort Worth actually look and feel and be represented of what Fort Worth actually is. That's all I say. And that's all we're fighting for. And because we care about this place and we want to see accountability, we want to see authenticity, and we want to see it inclusive to represent what Fort Worth is and what it looks like and what it's going to look like moving forward, rather than deal with those consequences later for all the mistakes and things we didn't do today. So please go vote. And Jimmy, great show.
We'll see you next week.